Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Monday, February 16th. Derek VanRiper here with Eno Sarris. On this episode, we begin our 2026 team previews. We have 3 team previews per episode for the next 2 weeks. We'll get to some baseball news you should know in just a couple of minutes. Eno, how was the weekend?
It was great. I saw a show, Daniel Donato's Cosmic Country. It was awesome. He was great. I saw some art, saw Manet and Morisot at the Legion of Honor here, so saw some Impressionism. Went to the beach. It was cold.
It's always cold at the beach. Always cold at the beach in Northern California.
Well, my kids still dug a hole in the ground. I still played catch on the beach, and then we went to Humble Sea and had some good craft brewing and some good food there. So it was an action-packed weekend for the Sarris crew.
Awesome. Hey, well, beach time's still good, even if it's like 55 degrees, right? Throw on a sweatshirt, still in the sand. It's still a great, relaxing place to go. My son turned 3, so we had a party at the house for him, so we had a great time celebrating that. And then it got really warm here. It got up into the 50s. I think it got to 61 degrees, which is
It was about
weird.
55 at the beach, so
yeah.
we had a singularity there.
We were at the park yesterday, and all the melting snow was still a little bit of a problem. It's a little slick, but still great to middle of February go outside and celebrate a 3-year-old's birthday by playing at the park. So we were happy to have that, and just good time with family. So good weekends all around here. Not the best of weekends for some teams, of course. More injury news rolled in. We're going to fold some of that into the team previews. That's how we landed on a few of the teams that we're going to talk about today. We got the D-backs, Braves, and Royals. 2 of those 3 teams were in the news, one for a transaction, the other for some pitching injuries. But as you expect this time of year, Monday has brought another pitching injury upon us. Pablo López is headed for an MRI on his elbow. He experienced some soreness during a live BP session and cut that short, according to The Athletic's Dan Hayes. And you might remember, Pablo López had a grade 2 teres major strain last season that cost him time, and then a forearm strain that knocked him out in September. At that time, he had an MRI that showed no concerns with the elbow or the UCL, but I was rereading one of the game recap stories from Lopez's early exit in September, and he was anxious about the injury at the time. So even though we had the follow-up update in November from Derek Felvey saying that he was having a normal offseason and Lopez had a clean bill of health, here we are in the middle of February, and he's getting another image taken of his elbow.
I'm going to go through my pitching ranks, and when they come back out again in a week or two, there are going to be fewer innings on a lot of these guys. I just feel like not only the guys that are, getting injured now, but it's making me rethink anybody who had an injury last year. Anybody who's returning that had an injury last year, I'm going to just shave a few innings off because, we know that forearm strains are a precursor to elbow strains. It's just right there on the kinetic chain. It's really close. So shame on me for giving whatever I gave him. Now I want to look. Now I
better
want
look.
to look. What does it say? How bad was I on Pablo Lopez's return from injury innings? I did have him lower. 161. That's too much. I'm gonna put that down to 131 now.
131 and falling. We'll see what we get as far as the MRI goes. It's unfortunate, right? It's just the nature of the beast. I think the thing that's always deceiving to me, though, is when you get the pronouncement of a normal offseason, I get disproportionately thrown off by that because I know that everything that GMs and presidents of baseball operations and managers tell us about injuries is not necessarily the truth, but I also don't think everything they say is a lie either, right? And the incentive to lie about something like that in November seems relatively low, but they tell you what they want to tell you, and I need to not put a lot of stock into that, right? We need to see health through spring training, I think, for guys that were dealing with arm injuries in particular. When they didn't come back from the arm injury in September or October, I think that's when we have that elevated level of concern that carries over. As far as depth options go in Minnesota, we've talked about this depth chart A little bit because we like some of the pitching there. Obviously, Joe Ryan's still a fixture. Bailey Ober coming off injuries of his own. Looks like he's an important piece. This is a world in which you could look at Zebby Matthews, Simeon Woods-Richardson, and Taj Bradley as all having spots to be in the rotation together if they have to go through a stretch where Lopez is unavailable for some or perhaps all of 2026.
Yeah, I did the math recently for a piece I was doing about the Tigers versus the Red Sox rotation that's coming out soon. I found that 150 innings on average came from starters that weren't in the top 5. And this is sort of retroactively looking at it too, just being like, here, sort them by innings, and then who's not in the top 5. So that's not the same as saying the top 5 on the depth chart going into the season, right? But it is, it does give you an idea of what you need. So what you're going to get from a 5th starter is probably 100 or so innings. A 6th starter, maybe you can get 120 from your 5th starter. You can get if they're healthy, and then there's always they're not healthy all season, and so on average the 6th starter gets 75 to 100 innings, and then the rest of the 50 innings are sort of littered among the next guys. I mean, teams use 10 starters on average. Not telling you anything you don't know. Is just that it takes a lot of starters. They had built this depth. Mick Abel will get 50 to 75 innings this year if the math holds, and more if Lopez is out for the year.
Right. Yeah, I think everybody moving up a chair is the initial adjustment. I don't know if you're going super aggressive moving anybody up just yet from where they are previously being drafted, because I think this outcome was kind of part of their respective projections all along. But we'll keep an eye on the situation with Lopez here over the next couple of days as more information becomes available. I think in the interim, he's almost undraftable until you get that update to know if there's going to be a lengthy absence or not, which is a pretty unfortunate spot to be in. One other spring news item to get to before we start breaking down team previews. We got an update on Christian Scott. He was touching 95 in a live bullpen session. That's according to Laura Albanese of Newsday. And the interesting thing about Scott is that the Mets have built up a lot of pitching depth. And because he had Tommy John with internal brace back in September of 2024, he's kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit for some people because Nolan McLean's burst onto the scene, Jonah Tong debuted, they had some prospects that were traded in the offseason. I think we'll see Christian Scott get big league innings at some point this year. It's just a question of when. It's probably, somewhere in the middle or maybe the later part of the season because he has minor league options remaining. But just kind of curious what your outlook is for Scott amidst all of the changes the Mets have had in that rotation group.
A little bit of a forgotten man, I think. We've the other sort of pitching development wins by the Mets, including Sproat, who's gone now, but Tidwell popped up in Scott's absence, and then obviously there's Jonah Tong, Nolan McLean that have sort of jumped past him on the depth chart, and I still think that Tong is ahead of Scott, but I think both will open in the minors. The last thing I want to say is that as fun as this report is, I like it. You have to remember hit is different than sit. And so hit 95 is not necessarily good news yet because in 2022, his max velo is 97, in 2023 is 96, and 2024 is 97. So I'm not saying he's not back. I'm just, in his next start, he may hit 97. I'm just saying that this is not news.
I put it in the news block because
I think he's
forgotten. Yeah, the 95 is not the key. It's the, hey, he's back, and he's actually on a timetable where he will be available to start games, probably at AAA to begin the year. But if they have a couple of injuries, he could become pretty important pretty quickly and end up on the redraft radar.
I was not trying to slag the rundown, sorry.
No, hey, take as many shots at the rundown as you want. The other bit of housekeeping, the listener leagues are underway in tandem with the NFBC, so we have kicked those off at the time of this recording. And for anyone who wasn't necessarily reading the rules ahead of time, just a reminder, the pick clock is 4 hours. It doesn't mean you have to use the whole 4 hours. In fact, I would encourage you not to use the entire 4 hours. I think the auto draft features are very good, where you can click that on, set a queue if you know you're going to be away. People have work and different things going on. But just a reminder, it is a slow draft. People are going to get into the rhythm. I think after a couple of rounds, most of the rooms will start moving along at a better clip. But a lot of folks out there, this is the first time playing in this format, so just be patient with your fellow league members.
Yeah. There's a couple of tricks you can play on fool around with the ADP, because you can like upload your own custom ADP situations there. Also look around at the auto draft. You can auto for 1 round or 2 round. You can even set a queue for different rounds. So like, let's say you're around the horn, you're 13 and you come back up, or you're actually, this is a 12-team league. So you're at 11 and you come back up again in 2 picks, and you don't want to have the same queue, right? You want to take a hitter and a pitcher. You don't want to mess it up with that. You can actually set a queue for the round you're in, and you can set a queue for the next round, and they can be different. And you can press auto next 2 rounds, and while you're sleeping or while you're on vacation, it can draft off of different lists. So really try to poke around and figure that stuff out. I have already taken my first pick, Shohei Ohtani. I forget what number league I'm in, but what up to my league? And is it true? Did we fill 800 plus leagues?
80 leagues. 80 12-team leagues, which is still a lot. We appreciate everybody jumping in.
I added a 0 and was like, Jesus, that's a lot. No, 80 is great, dude. I'm super excited that we filled so many leagues, and I'm super excited that we all get to play along in this. That's really fun.
I know we had a few listeners and viewers in different parts of the world that had a hard time getting registered, that couldn't register. Sorry that we couldn't work that out for this year for this particular league, but we will have a 6 picks contest coming up. Once we get to opening day, we'll make sure we put the group details for that in the show descriptions when you can register for that. I think that one is relatively easy to join from anywhere on the planet because there's no financial stuff connected to it, right? And this was a 0-entry league that we're doing at NFBC, but because they have leagues that have payouts, they have to have some verification of identity, and that gets complicated depending on where you live. So again, apologies to those of you that were unable to register for this contest. We'll make sure we find a way to get you into future things that we do. Okay. Oh, and one other reminder, the pick clock pauses overnight from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern time. So if you're on the West Coast, it's a little earlier for it to shut down. You can pick during that time, but you just won't time out. So be mindful of the breaks there. Sometimes the countdown clock gets a little bit weird between those hours, but it's not going to auto-draft you between 1 a.m. and 9 a.m. if you have time remaining on the clock. So here we go. Let's get into our team previews. The Arizona Diamondbacks kick things off because they reunited with Zac Gallen over the weekend. That was the reason why the Diamondbacks got to go first. There's no other reason. It's not because of Arizona alphabetically going atop the league or anything like that. The way our team previews work, we actually go through, kind of talk about the collection of hitters, how they project together. We have what's called the Rule of 5, where you have to identify 5 spots that are going to feature everyday players, because the way Major League rosters are built, you can only share 4 roster spots. You can only have platoons and timeshares at 4 spots. And usually that leads us to maybe upgrade a few guys that we could see ending up in larger roles than expected. So it's a really fun exercise for that reason. So if you hear us say Rule of 5, that is what we're talking about. Take a look at the pitchers as a group, figure out where things are over and under projected. And then, of course, we look at the PECOTA win projections from Baseball Prospectus, and we use the Goldilocks porridge scale, too hot, too cold, just right, in terms of what we think of that number for each team along the way. So really fun series.
Don't forget the lesser-known cousin of the Rule of 5, which is build a bench. Just really off the charts. Just everyone loves it. Everyone really loves to talk about the worst players on each of these teams.
I think people feel the same way collectively about Build a Bench that they do about Steely Dan. I think some people love it, and I think some people absolutely hate Build a Bench, and it just makes them angry.
Well, it's an important part to figure out. And actually, what's interesting about this Diamondbacks team, when you look at it, is that when you look at it through the lens of the rule of 5, you come up short, which is what you call opportunity in the fantasy circles. It is, if you are a Diamondbacks fan, a pain point possibly, but it is something that you circle when you're talking about the Diamondbacks this year. If you're going everyday guys, you're talking Nolan Arenado, Geraldo Perdomo, Ketel Marte, and Corbin Carroll. And if you add those numbers up, I can do that. It's 4. And so what we're missing is an everyday player. Now, obviously, Pavin Smith is going to be involved in a platoon at first. He's also going to be involved at DH. I think there's a chance that he's a sneaky winner early because there's 2 places for him to play. Then there's Jordan Lawler and Alec Thomas and maybe Ryan Waldschmidt that are battling it out for center and left while Lourdes Gurriel Jr. is out. Now, maybe when Gurriel Jr. comes back, he's the winner, and he becomes the 5th sort of regular as a right-handed player. I think that is totally a possibility. But in the meantime, in the first 2 or 3 months of the season, I think our candidates are Alec Thomas, because his defense will be so good that maybe he's just the center fielder, and maybe he hits a little bit better. I mean, he's not an awful hitter, so there's something there. Jordan Lawler, the young guy, comes in and just takes center field for himself and pushes everybody to a left field platoon. That's a possibility. And then there's a non-zero possibility that Pavin Smith just cobbles together near full playing time between DH and first base. I mean, he's a pretty good hitter.
Yeah, I think if you just look at WRC plus projections, the answer becomes Gurriel once he's healthy from that ACL tear. So that's your 5th guy then. But who gets that opportunity in the short term is really intriguing. I would say Jordan Lawler still stands out to me as someone that could get that opportunity. We've seen Alec Thomas get enough cracks at big league pitching where I'm not as convinced that there's one more level there, but defense could be a big part of the equation. I think they're also going to play Gabriel Moreno a lot, and by projection, he's tied for 3rd in WRC+. It's just weird to put your catcher in that rule of 5 because you have to carry 2. Like the way the roster works is you're not going to roll out there with just one guy anyway. So it doesn't ever pay to count the catcher in that group.
With his injury history, are you pushing him? Like, are you trying to get as much DH time as you can out of him? I mean, you might if you're just trying to get the most out of his offense, if you think that it's not making him tired.
Right, and it's just James McCann as the backup, so you don't really have to do a lot with McCann. Like, I think I'd push Moreno pretty hard for playing time if I were them. Like, I think we were pretty on board with him at price in the catcher preview, and that's still a case for me now as I kind of review this. I think with Waldschmidt in particular, he's tough for me to get on board with in redraft leagues right now, not because of the price. I don't think he costs that much at all, but I'm not convinced that he's an early promotion guy. I think he's a little more of a late season call-up. Maybe the possible absence of Corbin Carroll for the early days of the season coming off hamate surgery changes that, but Waldschmidt played 66 games at AA last year, 143 WRC+, held his own. He's a college guy out of Kentucky, so I think he'll be up this year, but I'm just not quite ready to flip that switch yet and say definitely opening day. So I've been kind of waiting to see what he does in some Cactus League games before trying to push him onto rosters.
Yeah, being 43% better than league average in AA as a 23-year-old is pretty good. I think there's no age adjustment. In fact, at 22 at AA, I forget what the averages are now. I think he's right at average, but in terms of age. And then so he did really well, but yeah, and I love he didn't strike out that much. I love his swing strike rate was real low. I love his walk rate was real high. I do question how much raw power is in there without knowing the batted ball stats, which we don't until he gets to AAA or the majors. If he hits a ball this spring over 110, I'm going to be a little bit more interested than I am right now, because with the way that you're looking at minor league stats for Ryan Waldschmidt, you're looking at 180, 190 ISOs, and he has actually very obviously runs well because he had 29 stolen bases in the minor leagues last year. So you don't know how many of those doubles are leg doubles or how many of those are batted ball power. So there's a big portion of what he does that we just don't know. We don't know how hard he hits the ball. We don't know how fast he swings the bat. Some of that we'll find this spring because the spring stadiums are all hooked up to Hawkeye, so we should be getting minor league data as soon as they start playing. But that's also different from how does he look at the plate? How lost does he look? Does he putting together a good plan? And some of that stuff you'll only know from watching him. So there's definitely a chance, I think, that he could do it. At 23, we're talking about, people are talking that Connor Griffin at 19 might make the Pirates. So I don't think it'd be crazy for them to try Ryan Waldschmidt. And then Jordan Lawler, I'm excited about him, but it's just taken so long that it tests even my patience, and I'd love to try and be as patient as possible with these guys. Plus, he hasn't, hit the ball with that much authority in the major league. So what we really want from him is a really low strikeout rate, I think. Unless he does hit a ball 110 or 111, then I'll sit up and take notice. He did it once in AAA last year. So I'm looking for batted ball power from him, or I'm looking for a shorter strikeout rate. And by the way, when people talking about like spring stats don't matter, well, strikeout rate is one of those things that can matter in a half a month or a month, and it is still a month of playing time. So, if Jordan Lawler strikes out like 14% of the, who didn't strike out at all last spring was Shea Langoliers. Guess what he did? He didn't strike out during the regular season. So if he cuts his strikeout rate, that's something I want to see from Jordan Lawler, or I want him to see him hit the ball harder.
Yeah, I think with Waldschmidt, if you look at some of the write-ups from Keith Law and Eric Longenhagen, Keith got him kind of more as like 20-plus homers eventually. Keith pointed out, though, that all 9 homers that Ryan Waldschmidt hit at AA last year came at home. We've talked about Amarillo being one of the very hitter-friendly places in the minors. If he spends time at Reno, it's going to be the same situation there. But I think because of his age, if he just looks good and not great, they can go ahead and just say, we need someone in left field. Let's just see what happens. Maybe we want to see what he looks like against big league pitching instead of AAA pitching, given the environmental factors down there. There's just a few questions kind of in the underlying numbers that alluded to. Again, that raw exit velocity, max exit velocity especially, will help shed some light on that. But do
you see a dark horse in the outfield? I mean, they got rid of Jake McCarthy. Tim Tawa can play out there a little bit. Barossa. Could Adrian Del Castillo steal time from Pavin Smith at DH? Like, where are you? Are there anybody that's sort of deep league circles here? I don't know that I see it.
I didn't see anyone in that outfield mix. That's kind of part of why I think the Lawler experiment might actually get some significant play this year. Tyler Locklear is coming off major injuries, so he's more of a wait-and-see sort of guy for me. All of this like playing time projection with the D-backs just points back to Nolan Arenado playing more than expected. Like when they made that move, I think we were kind of underwhelmed by it, but the more you look at their depth chart, the more you think they have a built-in expectation that he actually will fill a useful role for them, being a good defender and maybe offering a little bit of a bounce back with the bat too, which the first half last year did look a little bit better than the second half for Nolan Arenado. So there's a little bit of appeal in deeper leagues. On the pitching side, my fun fact for the Diamondbacks is not actually that fun if you're a Diamondbacks fan. The starting pitchers for this team were 21st in Fangraphs WAR last year, a total of 9 wins above replacement as a group. And they just ran it back. I mean, they brought back Gallen. We've talked about how he put the pieces back together over the course of the year, and I think they're way better with him than they were going to be without him. The other adjustments to the roster, they brought in Mike Soroka, who maybe gets shifted into a bullpen role to fill a need right now. They added Paul Sewald. They got Cade Stroud in a trade. So nothing crazy. It was just bringing back Merrill Kelly and Zac Gallen and then adding Soroka as that kind of wild card that could end up in either role, depending on how things break. They are waiting for some guys coming off major injury. I mean, Corbin Burns, AJ Puck, and Justin Martinez all had major elbow surgery in June of last year, so you could see returns from all 3 of those guys kind of scattered out over the course of this summer.
I'm just wondering, why haven't, there must be something going on in their pitching development program, because why haven't they had some pop-up guys? Like, why haven't they, why isn't there like, oh, hey, everybody watch out for Christian Mina? I'm not saying I'm not circling that name. I'm just saying he happens to be in their depth chart, behind these guys, and I don't even know who Mitch Bratt is. Mitch Bratt is a 2021 fifth rounder who had a decent ERA in the minors last year. He came over from Texas. I guess it's what's nice is he has 122 innings. They in the minor leagues last year. Like they did this with Fott too. When one thing that the Diamondbacks do is that when guys come up, they have innings. So they pitch their guys a little bit more aggressively than other teams, but I can't say anything else that's much positive because we're looking now at guys in their rotation that are the product of their player development system as well in Brandon Fott and Ryan Nelson. Yeah, Ryan Nelson's all right, and I'll make a case for Brandon Fott later, but you have to say that if you circle the young Mets, for example, they're picking in similar places. They're teams that are similarly, productive in terms of wins, in terms of where their draft position is. And the Mets, I would say, have produced better starting rotation candidates than the Diamondbacks recently. So something in that, something their acquisition as well. I mean, I don't actually blame the Corbin Burnes one on them. I think pitchers get hurt. That's I thought Burnes was a pretty good bet to be healthy, but he got hurt. But some of their other signings have not been great. The Jordan Montgomery signing, I didn't understand. The Eduardo Rodriguez signing, I didn't understand. The best signing they've ever done is Merrill Kelly, and they ran that one back. So,
yeah, why haven't they been able to develop more pitching is a fair question to ask. I mean, overall, you look at the projection from PECOTA. Baseball Prospectus is a great projection system. The win projection as of today, 78.4. Kind of feels about right to me. I can't talk myself into a massive exceed. Like if they won 81 or 82 games, it wouldn't shock me, but I just feel like they've got an uphill battle. The Giants are still solid. Everybody else in the division is at least as good as they were last year and maybe better. Even the Rockies might be a little better this year.
The one thing, though, that they've been able to do is coax better offense out of their particular pieces than you might expect. I don't know if it's through platoons or, having a good sense of which hitters can hit which shapes from pitches or just having hitters that sort of grind it out pretty well. But I'm going to take that as a slightly too cold. I think they'll be an above 500 team pretty comfortably. I think some of these things will sort of fall in their favor. And if they just need to find a closer for the half of the season before, Puck or Martinez comes back, that's a possibility that their bullpen isn't as bad as it looks right now.
I'm going to throw a C on them for an off-season grade, and it only got there because they brought Gallen back. They were in a pretty tight spot before they went ahead and did that. A few underrated players on this team on the hitting side. I'll stick with Jordan Lawler, still being drafted outside the top 300 overall as he gets looks in center field. And if they want to play Thomas in center, they could play Lawler in left. He played it during winter ball, but I think they have to give him a look to begin the season.
Yeah. I like I said, I have the two things I'm looking for: either make more contact or hit the ball harder. But he has shown glimpses of being able to do both, and I love the all-around athleticism of his game, and just the fact that he's a former shortstop that they're going to try and center, and I believe that it could work. And there's still left field open, so even if they want to try a soft open in left field, that's fine with me. My underrated guy is Nolan Arenado. He's super old, but every player can be interesting in the right situation. He was the 35th best third baseman last year, and he's going as the 34th third baseman this year. So this is a bit of a deep league play. But I will say last year feels like a little bit of the bottom of the barrel. And so if you're buying him at that price, his right-handed park factor for homers, according to Savant, goes from 85 to 97. So he's just in a better situation for hitting home runs. And I think there's got to be a little bit of rejuvenation. Those Cardinals teams were falling off, and, he was probably just biding his time. And you have to remember, we had so many trade rumors for Nolan Arenado before, like, last season even. So he He thought last season, oh, I'm going to the Red Sox. Remember, I'm going to the Red Sox. I'm going to the Yankees. There was all these places to go. And then, nope, you're coming back to this team, and we're going to suck.
Yeah, big box of Triscuits there last season.
Yeah, so instead he gets to go to a team that has better prospects, and so I'm gonna circle him and say I think he could be as good as, I don't know, the 15th or 20th best third baseman this year.
Okay, yeah, that's. I mean, it's not a crazy high-end outcome, but where he's going for deeper leagues, it's more like, hey, there's still something here. This could be a future Hall of Famer, and just better health in a new environment could actually lead him to something useful. On the pitching side, I mean, it kind of blurs together for me as far as the underrated starter or reliever, but I'll throw Mike Soroka's name out here. I think he's trying to add to that arsenal. We saw him thrive as a reliever with the White Sox, because it was 2 years ago now. I just think there's enough opportunities here. Their bullpen's a mess. The back of the rotation could be a problem. They're going to find a way to get good innings from Mike Soroka somewhere. It's another deep league play. You're not going to do this in a 10 or a 12 team league unless you know, like our listener league, he's draftable there because it's 50 rounds. But in an online championship with benches, he's more of a wait and see.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a great sleeper here for 10 and 12 team leagues anywhere on this pitching staff because, you know, like I even looked at Zac Gallen's season last year, and I know that, you know, he's a guy who has been 12 and 10 team worthy in the past, but I don't know that I see it necessarily. I have to point out that even in 2024, when he had a 3.65 ERA and a 25% strikeout rate, he had a 1.26 whip, which means that he was not a great pitcher that year. Of course, last year it cratered, and he was, according to the Player Rater, the 96th best starting pitcher. But I think his upside is something like a 3.8, 3.9 ERA with a 1.2 whip, 1.25 whip. It's just... I'm sure you can find like better upside near the end of your draft, right? He's more of a 15-teamer as well.
How did Fott only give up 4 homers in 97 in the third innings at home, but 22 homers in 79 in the third innings on the road? That is a WOBA difference of 110 points in his home and road splits.
He has some wild splits. So, you know, this is why I've picked Brandon Fott as my sleeper on this. And I just wanted to clarify before I got there that, like, you know, I think he's more of a deep league sleeper. I mean, this is a guy who put up a 5.25 ERA last year. And if you look at the splits, like even the first half and second half, it's like 5.25 in the first half, 5.25 in the second half. If you look month to month, you're like, oh, wow, he had some good months and he had some terrible months. So he was really hard to own last year. I know I have complete sympathy if you want to cross Brandon Fott off of your draftable lists. But here's my argument for putting him on there. Because if you look at Ryan Nelson, for example, as a foil, Ryan Nelson's only good pitch is his four seam. He's never really found a good secondary pitch. And I'm just worried that there's something about his mechanics of release. If he's a pronate or supinate or whatever it is, he's just not going to add a secondary pitch. He's had a lot of chances to add a good secondary pitch. And he's coming to camp talking about, you know, oh, my curve and slider. I don't know, man. You know, we've seen a lot of these, and I don't know if it's there. Let's look at Brandon Fott's arsenal right now. This is with the Stuff Plus revision, and I see enough here where I'm like, hey, that four seam's not bad. One thing that has happened is he had reverse platoon splits last year, which is really weird because he used to get torched by lefties. So last year, righties torched him, and he really, you know, stopped using the four seamers much and really leaned into the sinker against righties. I'm saying, hey, why don't you have like a really even mix against righties, four seam sinkers and cutters? So why don't you make it 30-30-30 in terms of fastball usage against those? See what that is like. When I look at this, I see a sweeper and a curve. So I see two pitches that work. The curve actually works better against opposite-handed hitters. So he's at the very least a guy who can have two fastballs and a secondary pitch against lefties and righties. And basically my overall point is there's enough green all over this graph that we're looking at that just shows, you know, his good pitches and where he's good. There's enough green all over this where I'm like, if he puts this together right, there's still something here. You know what I mean? Like I get more, I feel like more like, oh, this is a guy who just needs to figure out when to use his pitches in the right situations. Rather than with Ryan Nelson, I'm like, dude, you need a secondary pitch, and you've never really shown the ability to do it. So, both of them are, projected for low fours ERAs with poor strikeout rates, and so you're not going to buy either of these guys on projections. But this one's a vibe thing for me, where I'm like, I see enough green on this chart to say that Brandon Pfaadt has some of the weapons he needs, and he just needs to put them together. And I could see in his third full season at 27 years old, finally sort of putting the pieces together. And what would it look like? I think he would have like a 24% strikeout rate, a 3.75 ERA, and a 1.2 WHIP. So I guess his upside looks like Gallen's, upside, I guess, like it looks similar to Gallen's. The price is very different. Pfaadt is way cheaper than Gallen.
Yes, Pfaadt is a lot cheaper because the results were so bad last year. You're getting a nice discount. So if you are buying into Eno's breakdown of Brandon Pfaadt, you can get him for almost nothing. I mentioned the kind of blurry starter reliever questions around Soroka. I think you could maybe make a similar argument for Dre Jameson, who worked his way back from injury before the breakdown. He was one of their better pitching prospects, and I think the mix now is like a sinker, four-seamer, slider, and change. He throws hard. I mean, it was 96.5, I think, on the sinker last year, 98.3 on the four-seamer. So there's good stuff there, and whether they want to keep developing him as a starter or just giving him a chance to kind of speed to the high leverage role, I think there's something here for Dre Jameson in 2026. So I'm definitely intrigued for deeper leagues.
Yeah, with the sort of gradual move, I think he might be out of the rotation by now. If we look at 2023 in the minor leagues, he had 5 games started. But in the major leagues, it already happened in 2023. Dre Jameson had 15 games, 3 starts. 2025, already now you're in the minor leagues, he had 14 appearances, 0 starts. And in the major league, 0 starts before injury. So I think he's comfortably in the bullpen right now, which actually I think is better news for trying to figure out what he will do, because there is an absolute land of opportunity in this bullpen right now, at least until Justin Martinez and AJ Puck come back. There is just absolutely not a favorite in this bullpen, if you ask me. There are people staying like Paul Sewald, but Paul Sewald threw 90 last year. Kevin Ginkel has been given the role in the past, but his four-seam had a 78 stuff plus last year. And, in terms of velocity, is no longer a standout. Ryan Thompson's great, but he throws basically semi-underhanded. So my pick in that bullpen is actually it's one of the two. I know I can see the rundown, so I can see your pick is Dre Jameson, and I'm just going to pick Cade Stroud as a foil to that, just because Cade Stroud has 5 pitches, all above average by stuff plus, and poor command, and I'm just hoping that he just harnesses those breaking balls at all, because I think there is an elite reliever in there if he does that.
I think part of the story you got to tell yourself for Arizona is that they will find some guys that have not been healthy enough to contribute in that bullpen to contribute if they're going to hold together, maybe exceed expectations in that facet, nudge back closer to league average with that veteran group of starters. Maybe you get something else out of Pfaadt like you suggested, and that's sort of how they get there, because they have been producing big numbers offensively year over year. That's something they have done pretty well in recent seasons. So very curious to see what they do. I'm a little more pessimistic about their outlook overall than you are, though, for 2026. Let's move on to Atlanta. Talk about the Braves. This is a team that the position player group is usually easy to figure out because they lean very heavily on their core. And I think historically it's been more than 5 guys in their rule of 5. This year, you look at the projections, it's easy to see it with Olsen, Riley, Acuna, Albies. Profar and Harris are probably the other 2 that you could look at as everyday guys, with Harris, because of his defense in center field, still getting a lot of run against lefties, even though he doesn't necessarily hit them that well. And Profar sort of moving into that corner outfield DH role. They added Mike Yastrzemski in the offseason. I see him as a kind of a clear platoon guy with Eli White or Jorge Mateo. One of the righties in the bench will spell him, so that's kind of easy to see. And then shortstop's a little bit of a mess right now because Ha-Seong Kim has a finger injury he's coming back from. Mauricio Dubon will get the opportunity to start at that spot probably as the interim shortstop until Kim comes back. So, I mean, you could see Kim with health also being in that group, maybe 6 or 7 guys being near everyday fixtures for Atlanta this year. And even behind the plate, Drake Baldwin, has Sean Murphy on the IL to begin the year. It's Jonah Heim working as his backup. Drake Baldwin probably plays at least as much as your typical number 1 catcher with a veteran backup. Like, he's not going to be top 3, top 5 at the position. He's not going to be in the William Contreras tier of playing time where it's like every single day, but he's probably in the second tier of catcher playing time, even in year 2.
Yeah, I think, their long history of sort of skimping with utility guys on the Braves and playing their starters, more often than the rest of the league. I think that will continue, although this year they did go get Mauricio Dubon in a trade, and I thought that was, hey, look, they're investing in depth in a way that, I think that they not necessarily have done in the past. Well, the Ha-Seong Kim injury puts Dubon, I think, as the starter at short. That means their bench is Jorge Mateo, Brett Wisely, who they traded away and then traded back for after the injury, and Eli White. And so I think they, and then their backup catcher. So I think they're right to play their starters, actually. I mean, this is, you could see it sometimes in the NBA where you're like, oh, your bench is not very good. And, there's certain coaches that are just like, yeah, I know my bench is not very good. I'm just going to play 6 or 7 guys really hard. And, I think that's a little bit what the Braves do. Does that port over to their starting? Like, why are they so snake bit starting pitcher wise? I mean, the newest news is that Hurston Waldrop, is now going in for imaging. Spencer Schwellenbach is already on the 60-day IL, so he's missing at least half the season. It looks like. Grant Holmes is pitching with half a UCL. And
half,
Reynaldo
3/4.
Lopez.
I mean, like, it's partially torn. It was partially torn at the end of last season, anyway.
Exactly how much? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know.
We also, what's interesting enough, we don't even know if he suffered that last year.
Right? Is it chronic? Sure. Is it just a long-term thing he's had that they saw in the imaging?
Yeah, so I find that interesting. But, Reynaldo Lopez, in the context of somebody like Pablo Lopez, you're like, oh, I want to put Reynaldo Lopez down for 130, 150 innings if he's healthy and he's looking good in camp. Well, no, don't do that because he was hurt last year. And it just seems like somebody else is going to crop up with him. And I don't really love their depth past these guys. I mean, maybe we are going to see Didier Fuentes because Bryce Elder, if somebody goes down for the season, Bryce Elder is somebody that I'm okay with picking up as a team and being like, I'm going to stick in Bryce Elder for this Saturday start because somebody's hamstring, is barking, right? I don't love it if I'm like, I just lost Spencer Schwellenbach for the season and I'm going to replace him with Bryce Elder. Then I think I might, try out J.R. Ritchie or Didier Fuentes, 2 young guys. I trace this back to J.R. Ritchie, it's everywhere. That he's, there's a buzz about him in camp. And I was like trying to find the original source, and it's just a tweet from a writer saying there's a real buzz about J.R. Ritchie in camp. And it turned into like an update on CBS, on RotoWire, on RotoWorld. And it's like, I mean, I get it. I understand. I used to be a part of that. It was my job to do those updates. You've done that too. But it seems like not a lot to go on. We don't know why there's a buzz. Is he throwing harder? What? Like, we don't know anything except there's just a buzz. And I looked at Richie's numbers last year in the minors. He had a pretty good slider. It's an okay curveball. The fastballs don't look that good. I don't know. I don't have anything that I would like circle Richie other than that one tweet. So I'm going to leave him there right next to Didier Fuentes as guys who look increasingly likely to contribute innings to the staff that we don't actually know that much about.
Yeah, they're going to have to rely some more on young guys than they probably are expecting, at least as of right now. The Waldrop situation, as of Monday, he's supposed to go see Dr. Keith Meister to see if there's something going on in his elbow, so that's never great. So we'll see what happens there. With Schwellenbach, we know he did have the surgery to remove bone spurs. That was a little bit of an unknown last time we spoke about him. So yeah, they don't have a timetable for his return, but on the 60-day IL, as you mentioned, that means he's out until I think at least the end of May at the absolute earliest, and even that might be pushing it a little bit. It makes you wonder if the dreaded last standing free agents, the Zach Littell, Lucas Giolito, Max Scherzer trio, if one of those guys gets a call to help bridge the gap. They seem to like Joey Wentz and Bryce Elder enough to give one of those guys a shot to begin the year, so we're kind of keeping an eye on how they look over the course of camp. But, you mentioned Ronaldo Lopez, and it is somewhat surprising to me that he got to 135 innings 2 years ago. I wouldn't expect much more than that because he was so hurt last year, but he's also at the age where if he feels good, they're just going to let him go at this point in his career. He's 32, right? They're not protecting him for the future. They're just saying, you're the guy. Let's just see what happens. He was 17th in the player rater in 2024 among all pitchers because he ripped off a 1.99 ERA and a 1.11 whip over those 135 innings. You're obviously not expecting that, but if he's a 3.5 and a 1.2 whip, that wouldn't be that surprising, and he doesn't cost much, so I do think there is a pretty easy late dart you can take there. I almost like him more in leagues where I can cut him if he gets hurt again than I do in leagues where I have to wait, but it depends on how much injury risk I've taken on, right? You're getting him around pick 350, pick 400. That might tick up a little bit with all the injuries they're dealing with, but I don't think he's going to go to the moon as a result of moving up that depth chart.
Lopez strikes me as a better pick in leagues with free agency than Grant Holmes because I think his upside is better. We saw an amazing season from him. Grant Holmes' upside is not to give us, I think, a sub-2 ERA, 130 inning season. But both of them are useful in drafting holds as guys who have distinct roles and will get all the innings their health allows them to get. However, I do, find them, if you put them up against somebody like a Matthew Liberatore, just as an example, because we're talking late draft and hold guys, I'd rather take the Liberatore over a guy like those because I think Liberatore would be healthy all year. So I think health still matters when you're picking depth draft and hold pitchers because you can say, oh, just get whatever innings you can out of them, but, you could just end up with 8 injured pitchers on your draft and hold squad, and just
it happens.
That I've definitely seen that myself. So health is still a concern in depth, but Ronaldo Lopez in 10 and 12 team leagues, I think is an interesting final pitcher. He'll get out of that if he pitches well all spring and looks healthy.
Yep, I think we're in lockstep on Ronaldo Lopez at this point. Taking a look at the PECOTA win total projection for this team, 90.6. You on the too hot, too cold, or just right side of that one?
I think it's too hot given the way that this pitching staff is falling into place. They can hit, they can bang. This is going to be a good lineup, so maybe they'll just win a lot of games with high scores, but it just and I hate to be recency biased and just be like, it's all falling apart, but I don't see the pitching depth I want to see given these injuries that are coming down right now.
Yeah, I'll say this with the caveat: when I say just right, I usually think that's within about 2 wins of the total in either direction. I think this is closer to a just right for me. I can see them still being an 88-win team. I think it's one of the better lineups in the National League, top to bottom. I think not having an everyday DH locked in is probably good for the health of their position player group. They can give those guys more rest now that they don't have Marcell Ozuna just sort of glued into that spot, but how much will they actually rotate it? That's the question. With Profar coming off sports hernia surgery, maybe they play him there more than I expect them to.
That's apparently what they asked him in camp, and that it sounds like he's going to be playing DH a lot, and he sort of made sure that they understood that he didn't like that.
I don't think they liked that he got suspended for PEDs last year. So maybe they should go through some kind of divorce,
or get some counseling.
Yeah, get a little counseling at least, and go to counseling first. Don't just light the relationship on fire without counseling. I mean, that's just everyone knows that at this point. My fun fact though on this team, as we get to the underrated guys and such in just a second, is Michael Harris was the number 15 hitter in the player rater during the second half of 2025, which followed a first half in which he was 154th out of 155 qualified regulars in WRC plus. Like just two extremely different seasons from Harris. So I think if you're looking at him at a pick 100 range ADP right now, you're telling yourself that he figured it out last year, and seeing that and seeing the past track record and knowing how good his defense is, even though you're expecting him to hit lower in the order when everybody's healthy, you're probably like comfortable at price with Michael Harris.
I love that his second half was great, but I just have to point out that his September was not.
No, hey, you can have a bad month in a good half, though. Like that can be done.
For sure. But he fell down to a 69 WRC plus for September, so it's all July and August, and every other month he had a WRC plus that started with a 6 or worse. In June he had an 11 WRC plus, meaning he was 89% worse than league average.
Happens to the best of us, man. Happens to the best of us.
I guess I would just say that, like, there's an interesting draft philosophy angle here that we've been talking about in the Discord, which is just that, in head-to-head leagues, you think maybe you want boring players that are very consistent so that you always have them every week. I would say that is generally true. But you can have a boring team that's generally consistent all year and run into a buzzsaw any time against any other team. So I would say that even if you're putting together a generally boring, consistent team, putting a Michael Harris on there is not a bad idea. Because what if he has one of those 170 WRC plus, 160 WRC plus months next September or next August when you need him most in head-to-head? So variance can be your friend in small doses is my take on it.
All right. Well, I'm generally in where he's been going right now. I'm not going to have him everywhere, but I'm definitely not afraid of what happened in the first half because, again, I think he made some adjustments. Some underrated players on this squad on the hitting side. I'm sticking with my second base preview call of Ozzy Albies. I think he still goes around like pick 180, 190 in a lot of drafts. Looking at February ADP, I know second base is pretty deep, but this is a guy that's actually finally healthy after a couple of years of carryover effect. And the good news is Albies got in front of the hamate bone problems that everyone's having right now by suffering that fracture in the last week of 2025. So he has already injured his hamate and recovered from it. I think that's a good thing in the year of the hamate here in 2026.
Yeah, I like Drake Baldwin. I know he's already kind of going high. I was looking for his ADP there real quick, but I think he's, he was the 8th best catcher last year, and every peripheral for Drake Baldwin looks beautiful. I think he looks like he's ready to take off. I think it looks like prime Will Smith. And with Murphy to the IL to the start of the season, Drake Baldwin could get 100 more plate appearances he got last year. So I think he could be one of those guys that's worth his high ADP. So it's hard to call him underrated or sleeper because he's going high. But I think whatever the word is for, buy high or whatever, I would do that. I think he still has upside to beat this investment on draft day.
All right, perhaps one more level there for Drake Baldwin. If you couldn't tell earlier, Ronaldo Lopez fits the bill for me as an underrated starting pitcher in this group right now because of that past success he had. I think as long as he gets through the spring unscathed, he's going to end up being an okay value as one of your 5th, 6th options maybe to start. Probably in more than he's out of your lineup, actually, in most formats if he's actually healthy.
I wonder, if Michael Harris, will they platoon him? We did talk about how their bench isn't great. They're going to platoon Yastrzemski, and they would have room to platoon Harris, except that Mauricio Dubon is listed as the backup center fielder, and he will be the shortstop. And so if Jorge Mateo is playing shortstop, then I don't think they have a backup center fielder. Jorge Mateo could platoon with Michael Harris, but there could be a chance that Michael Harris is just an every down back, everyday player. And that would make him slightly underrated at his draft price too.
You got a starting pitcher you think's a little undervalued other than Lopez?
Not really. Grant Holmes has 2 good breaking balls, and he has a role, so I like him in draft and holds. I think that's the best I can come up with.
Draft and holds, maybe NL only leagues too for anybody still playing in those formats. On the relief pitcher side, I think you've had a long time, multi-year fade of Raisel Iglesias that has not come to fruition yet. We've talked about the bullpen adding Robert Suarez. He keeps sliding in some drafts to that pick 200 range. I actually like him at that price on teams where I've only got one closer, or maybe I've just waited and kind of faded saves as a whole and just want to take some shots late and try to find two closers after that kind of part of the draft. I mean, I think there's a chance Iglesias just blows up and they just flip spots, and they're both good high leverage relievers. So just knowing that Suarez has had enough success in that role to eventually take it over if he gets the opportunity again, I think it's fine around that price.
Yeah. In saves and holds leagues, I guess like Ian Hamilton and Aaron Bummer are two guys where the stuff really fell off last year, so the projections aren't that interesting, but they really, could use one of those guys in the 8th and the 7th. And they've had better stuff in the past. So I don't know. That's one where if I just hear Eamon Hamilton and, is back up to 96, 97s, or Bummer, his velo is up, then that's slightly interesting to me in holds leagues. But, yeah, this one's so obvious though, that the Robert Suarez cost is really high, so it's not that much of a fun sleeper for me.
No, there's some leagues where he goes a bit earlier than what I described, and I'm not jumping him up. I just like him in the leagues where he sits down closer to the ADP. Offseason grade for these moves, I'm sitting at like a B- maybe. I mean, I like that they kind of rebuilt the bullpen. It went from very weak to actually good by bringing back Iglesias, adding Suarez, adding Hamilton, re-signing Kinley and Piamps. It actually looks generally good. I think the reason I'm a little bit lighter on the grade here is it's hard to get a shortstop in free agency some years. They did the best they could trying to get Kim, and they had that fluke injury. And I think they're a little more balanced, as I mentioned before, not having an everyday DH, even if they're going to nudge Profar towards that. But it just feels like they were one move away, maybe because of the injuries that they already knew they had on the pitching side. Like Chris Sale's lack of durability and age, I think, factored along with Strider coming off elbow surgery last year and Schwellenbach being hurt at the end of last season. Probably put them in a position where one more good veteran starting pitcher. If they were the team that would have got Zac Gallen, I think that grade would be quite a bit higher.
Bassett too, and I was a little surprised by the price for Chris Bassett, but I guess it was because it was a 1-year deal. He got a bigger AAV. I'll give him an incomplete, I guess. If they throw Lucas Giolito in this mix, I'll feel a little better about it. So I guess there's a chance they could still, add a starting pitcher and make me feel better about it. If I was forced to give him a grade, I'd give him a B-.
All right, so B-, incomplete, probably even closer to a C+ or C, depending on what happens in these next couple of weeks. How they adjust to these injuries will be important. One more team to get to on the previews today. We head to Kansas City. Easy to see 4 guys in the everyday mix for the Royals. Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, Michael Garcia, Salvador Perez. And from there, it's sort of is it a young guy like Jack Caglione? Is it Carter Jensen getting more opportunities than expected? Because they can rotate catcher and DH a little bit, and even first base, they could play Sal at first and DH Pasquantino on days where they want to give him a break. They could DH Jensen a little bit if they want to and catch Sal. So they have some options. As you look up and down, the bottom half of the lineup, it's sort of a beauty is in the eye of the beholder situation. You could talk yourself into probably 3 or 4 different players emerging to be the 5th in their rule of 5. So I'm curious, as you look at their depth chart, who do you actually like?
So we're counting India as one of the 4, or
I didn't put India in there. You could say it's India. I think it's Witt, Pasquantino, Garcia, and Sal as 4, and the 5th one totally up to you, whether it's India or somebody else.
I think Isaac Collins or Jonathan India, and what I like about both of them is what I like about Isaac Collins is he's a switch hitter. And so, putting a switch hitter out there that will make better contact than average, get more walks than average, runs better than average, and fields at least at average, I think that's an easy way to be like, yes, I should be in there. I'm better than average, and I hit from both sides of the plate. That complicates things for people who like Lane Thomas, but Kyle Isbell is not a great bat. And so either Isbell and Thomas is a platoon, or Thomas just takes that role and Isbell becomes a fourth outfielder. So I like Collins that way. What I like about India is just right-handed bat that does a lot of the same things that I just said about Collins. Should be above average in most facets of the game. I do not know what happened to his speed last year. And I'm assuming there is an underlying injury. And if there's an underlying injury and he just gets back to being a league average hitter, then I think he's going to be better than Michael Massey and become basically the everyday starter at second. So between India and Collins, that's somewhere in there is my answer.
Yeah, India, by HCC's projection, comes out with a 104 WRC plus. That would put him pretty safely in their group of guys they would play on an everyday basis. I think you're right. There could be a health-related component here. With Jack Caglione, sure, we like him. We like the power. But at the same time, he needs to show he can hit big league pitching consistently to be more than a big side platoon masher in the short term. Even if the long-term outlook is really bright, there has to be some production that kind of gives him that runway.
Yeah, I think he needs to. Also, from a team perspective, you just kind of want him to put him into positions to succeed. You want to get him the confidence back up. The confidence is gone right now, I think, and so what you do, you have him sit on days against lefties, and you say you'll be in there soon, but we're just taking it easy. And he can play his way into that just by being a star. He's still my favorite underrated bat on this team. But Isaac Collins is also, I think, a little bit underrated just because of the fact that he doesn't have a tool or a skill that leaps off the page. You're like, oh my God, I need this guy for this. He kind of reminds me, Joey Wendell was a guy that came up that we were like, I asked Billy Beane once, this guy doesn't have a carrying tool, as they say. He doesn't have a tool that stands out. And he said, I don't know if I believe in a carrying tool. He's above average in most facets of the game. And that's how I see Isaac Collins.
Yeah, good enough to keep playing, switch hits too, so maybe he's the surprising fifth guy in that group at some points in the year too, depending on health. That's the key too. Like the rule of five could shift depending on who's actually healthy at any given time in the season. But as far as the changes they made, it was the Collins trade. They brought in Lane Thomas for depth. If you look down, you'll find like Abraham Toro on a minor league deal. I don't think Toro is going to be much of an impact guy. On the pitching side, a lot of changes in the bullpen. Matt Strahm, Nick Mears, Alex Lang. They just added Mitch Spence. I think Aaron Sanchez got a minor league deal there, but you're not expecting a whole lot there. And they only lost Michael Lorenzen, Hunter Harvey, and Taylor Clark. So it's a lot of the same pieces for the most part, at least the most important pieces for this Royals team.
I want to give them a little bit of credit for stuff that they did last year during the season. I think getting Bergert and Kolek is an underrated good move because if you look at their depth behind that, it's Bailey Falter, I believe he's hurt, Mason Black. So I think, getting Kolek and Bergert for Fermin was a strong move because they had Carter Jensen coming up, and now Bergert and Kolek are their 6 and 7s, and like I said, that's 150 innings that they put in place before the season. And with guys like Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha, and Chris Bubich in the rotation, you need to have a good 6 and 7, I believe. Those are guys that have had some injuries in the past. So if you throw that in the mix, I think I get into the B territory. I'm assuming that they didn't have the money or in the budget. I know that's a complicated matter in terms of baseball politics, but they just haven't spent a lot in the past, and so I would assume they didn't have a lot of money they didn't spend. So you're giving them a worse grade than I am. I'm going to give them maybe a B- as well because I like some of the moves they made. This is when you don't have a big budget. This is the kind of moves I want you to make. I want you to go get an Isaac Collins. I want you to go get Bergert and Kolek. I think those are decent moves.
I like the way they're generally running the organization right now. They've been a little more aggressive, adding some veteran pitching in off seasons past, and you can't always go out and get the guys you want because sometimes the guys you want don't want to take your money, and sometimes you do hit your budget. We've brought this up before. I think sometimes when you look at an off-season grade, it comes out low if you don't count moves that were made during the previous season. Like the trade deadline sort of, I think, begins the off-season for teams that are sellers. and you could also get better for the immediate future. I mean, I think this time last year, we were talking about Randy Arozarena as a mid-season addition in 2024 for Seattle, and that he would have an impact in 2025 because they still had club control. So I do think it's worth accounting for that. If you're just grading what they did this winter, I'd throw them down for like a D+, because I just wish they would have done something else to make this lineup a little bit better. But if you're opening it up a little bit, I'm with you. I think the general trajectory here is good, and this organization is at least moving in the broader right direction. I think their bullpen scares me a lot. We talked about Carlos Estevez as someone that we don't like at price, especially. But when I look for guys that could, yeah, I mean, who's going to take his job? I just to break the outline for a second, my underrated reliever is Lucas Erceg just being healthy, because I think if he's healthy again, he had a shoulder impingement last year, maybe the K rate comes back and he becomes their best option to replace Carlos Estevez. But if you just said, hey, DVR, Carlos Estevez fell 75 picks off his ADP because everybody in the room had the same view of him that you do, eventually I'd say, it's a good enough chance he keeps the job and gets me 25 or 30 saves, maybe with bad ratios, where I would actually draft him eventually.
This is a bad bullpen. I mean, look at this chart. It is not a good bullpen. Look at the projected ERAs through Oopsie. Matt Strahm has the best with a 3.99. The average reliever last year had a 4.08. The only two players in this bullpen that are projected to have a better ERA than league average are Lucas Erceg and Matt Strahm. Now, Matt Strahm actually had good stuff last year. The locations dropped a little bit, and I wonder if the Phillies thought maybe an injury is coming or something. Maybe they saw something in the data, because he looks like the best reliever in this bullpen. The problem is that Matt Strahm is left-handed, and I don't think that there's a natural left-hander that can take his place as the guy you really want when there's the big lefties are up for another team. So I think Matt Strahm could get some saves, but I agree with you. Lucas Erceg is the underrated reliever in this, because, I expect that 99 stuff plus from last year to be higher this year. I think he'll come into camp healthier and all of his numbers will align better. And I eventually think that he will be the closer. I've taken him a lot late in draft and holds in the 45th, 44th rounds and stuff. And I'm happy to take him because, health can impact your stuff plus. But I just wanted to say that overall, this is a bad pen. Carlos Estevez is going way too high right now in most drafts. And I do wonder if the listener leagues, Carlos Estevez will drop so far that DVR will take him.
I'm so afraid that I'm going to draft a team of guys I don't like, because everyone's going to take players we do like, 'cause that's just the nature of the listener league. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if I have to stick to my priors or if I can break the mold a little bit. I think the strength of this team could be the rotation again. Not that we expect like massive dominant strikeout totals from everybody, but it's a competent group. Like I think Cole Ragans is my underrated starting pitcher of this group. Underrated in the sense that I think he could be a top 5 fantasy starter league wide. And I don't think you're not drafting him like that because he was hurt last year. He just has to stay healthy. The thing that I like about him, he can miss bats in the zone at an elite sort of clip, right? So that's the thing I really like. And then you look behind him, and it's Lugo and Waka and Noah Cameron, who was good last year, and Bubic, and they have some depth. Like, I think they'll be able to chew up innings. I'm really curious to see what the changes to the outfield walls does to many of their pitchers, though. Maybe it makes their lineup look better and their pitching look worse. I don't know. Like, that could easily be a scenario where that happens. But I think the hard thing I have with this Royals team is just like, it just seems like average to me. And I see PECOTA has a 85.2 projected win total. That's first in the AL Central. So that's too hot for me, even though I like the overall organization. Like, the direction is good. There's quality. You have some star players at the top. Sal Perez, man, more homers than Vlad Jr., Bryce Harper, Corbin Carroll, and Yordan Alvarez over the last 3 seasons combined. And number 1 in homers over the last 3 seasons, hit by guys age 33 and older. Yeah. He's an underrated guy that's just been around for a while.
And the projections love him. I mean, I guess there's some risk that that he just gets hurt, especially he's playing in the WBC, and he got hurt in winter ball, and he's just older, and he might get hurt. So I get all that. But, Sal Perez is a great answer for, I think that could be a good answer for the underrated bat here. That's not your answer for underrated bat, though.
It's not. I'm going to say Lane Thomas. I think it's a little bit of a soft fade on Isaac Collins repeating what he did as a rookie. Larger fade of Kyle Isbell just being more than a bench guy at this point in his career. Lane Thomas can get you 15-plus homers and 20-plus steals with everyday playing time. I think there's a chance he carves it out.
And I love Jack Caglianone. I've said this before, but I just want to throw this chart up again. He profiles so similar to the Junior Caminero that I have to believe that he'll figure out where to unlock this swing. By bat speed, Jack Caglianone 77.4 miles per hour, Junior Caminero 78.5. That does sound different. However, both of those are like 95th percentile in the big leagues or higher. In terms of tilt, Jack 29, Junior 26. So Jack's not as extremely flat, but Junior is pretty. Both these guys are flat. In terms of intercept point, the average is 30. Jack has a 33. Junior Caminero has a 36, so he's getting the ball further out in front. Maybe that's the answer for Jack, although we did talk with Jed about getting the ball out in front without, putting all your weight out in front. You don't want your weight on the front foot. So there are maybe some mechanical things that Jack has to figure out. In terms of swing and strike, they both make a lot of contact for guys that swing the bat as hard as they do. Junior 11.7, Jack 12.9. It's not a perfect comp. There are no perfect comps, but there's enough here for me to say, dude, if Junior can figure it out with very much the same swing characteristics, Jack can figure it out. Plus, you have, the prospect pedigree, the high draft pick. I think Jack is worth where he's going right now because he's not going very high. He's going as like a third outfielder in 15-team leagues, and I think that's a great time to take a shot at somebody.
Yeah, February in Draft and Holds, the 50-round 15-teamers, the Draft Champions Leagues, pick 179 to pick 236 is the range. So you're talking about 12th round or later in all of those drafts. Lane Thomas going even later, pick 332 to 490. So very, very cheaply available. I mentioned Reagan's being underrated just in the sense of I think he's a little better than other people do on their overall list. I think people are ranking based on injury risk, which totally makes sense. But if you miss out on some of those top-end aces and want to try and find one a little bit later on, round 3, round 4, I think Reagan's can be that guy. You still like Waka and Lugo a little bit as innings eaters, though?
Yeah, I was trying to find, what their ADPs are, and I think this is a total draft and hold 15-team, real deep. So, they're going after pick 350, Waco and Lugo.
Yeah,
I mean, why would you rather have Grant Holmes than Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo?
Perceived upside from being younger, I think, maybe. Like just the belief that there's going to be a little more in K rate. And Lugo sometimes gets up close to pick 300, but not often. Like the range is 316 to 404.
Yeah. So I think Lugo and Wacha, and Lugo is going a little bit ahead of Wacha, and I actually don't know why, because I think they're not the same pitcher in terms of what they throw, but they represent the same thing to me. Veteran pitcher that, if the health is right, could have a good season, and they'll pitch in even if their home park is not as pitcher friendly as it was in certain ways before. They'll pitch in some pitcher friendly parks. Their division is not difficult. It is the worst division by OPS last year. So hey, like easy opposition in terms of bats and a defined role, and if they're fine, if they're healthy. The AL Central is an easier division than the NL East, in terms of opposition. Yeah, so I'll take Walker and Lugo over Holmes, it's a sort of a Lodem thing, model spelled backwards incorrectly, because I don't really have. I'm not highlighting a pitch shape thing, or it's not. They have good velo. I don't have anything for you. I don't have nothing for you other than they've done it before, and they might do it again.
Last question before we go. So are you over or under or just right on the 85.2 win total for the Royals from PECOTA?
Does that say that they are first in the AL Central by PECOTA?
Based on PECOTA, yeah.
Sorry, dude. I love you Royals fans, but that's too hot for me. I don't see them winning this division.
I didn't expect that either. I'm trying to just be optimistic about them relative to the other teams in the division based on that. 'Cause I do like PECOTA a lot, and that's why we use it as the basis for these too hot, too cold, or just right. So Eno says too hot. I say a little too hot as well. I still see kind of an 81 win team, but hey, PECOTA is smarter than me very often. So maybe the Royals have a little something extra brewing there, especially if my Reagan's call comes up, right? You put that with Bobby Witt Jr., who's capable of winning an MVP award, then like both of those guys go off in the same season, and you get
I think Jack
positive
needs
health
to
outcomes.
go off in this one too.
Yeah, you guys got to find a couple other things there. If the bullpen's better than we expect, maybe some of the depth starters we talked about take off in a short relief role. There's ways it can happen, but having a harder time seeing it, I think, than the machines are right now. We need to go. 3 more team previews coming out on Tuesday. A reminder, if you're in the Listener League, keep an eye on your devices. Make sure you get those picks in a somewhat timely manner, but let's have some fun with it. Looking forward to competing with everybody over the course of this season. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.